Okay, so now continuing with the logic of main API. This file has a lot of content. Let me just read with you the overview that I've written here. This file aims to provide a REST API server for the front-end repo found out this. Again, as literally said, we have a REST API server here using FastAPI Python library, and it provides some endpoints, which we can see here, outline if we collapse this and see these functions. All of these are endpoints, and basically an endpoint mean is that for the front-end code, for this front-end repo, which displays the Ansari.chat website, if we go to that repo, which I actually have here locally, and then search for a specific endpoint, for example, I searched for users register, I will get its location here. And if we trace back this function, I think we can trace it back to the part of the page, of the sign up page, or the sign up button and the or register button. And pressing that button will run this logic, which will call this endpoint. Okay, so this endpoint is basically this function called register user. Okay, with this URL. I searched for this part specifically because the API version 2 is part of the base URL. So if we copy this and Control Shift F it here in the front end repo, you won't see anything. So that's part of the trick that you normally sometimes take substrings of the original string that you want to search for in the repo. So yeah, so this is the file which talks to the front end basically. And this is a high level of the steps that this function has, or not steps, but what this file does. Import necessary modules, obviously. Initialize FastAPI application and configure middleware. What does this part mean? It means this code right here. Okay, we initialize an app, a FastAPI instance in app, and this app object, we bind to it certain decorators which like assign certain characteristics to this instance. Okay, so for example, exception handler here, we say that for this application that we instantiated right now and that we're going to run in a few seconds, we want to make its exception handler like this. Okay, you can see this link for details, but essentially what this does is if there's an error that isn't caught below, like a try except block, if an error wasn't caught in this blocks and got traced to the main code here, then we make sure to run this function initially, which basically does nothing. It literally just logs it, just logs the issue that happened. But other than that, it just returns the JSON response that it would have returned otherwise. Anyways, this is an example. Another example of using app here is setting up the middleware, app.middleware, setting the middleware features or parameters. So one thing to note here is that we're putting the list of origins. If you recall, the origins, we got that from the config.py, which got that from the env example file. If you remember here, remember that. So we get that list and we say that if the request that comes to you in the current endpoint that has been triggered, if that request has a host or origin in that list of origins, then allow it, otherwise don't allow it. And we extend actually these origins using this function. What this function does is take the original origins again from the settings from the config.py, but add to them some couple of more links or URLs, I mean, based on certain conditions. If you're in debug mode, then obviously you want to add this as well, etc. Okay, so this is what this function does. And yeah, this is regarding the middleware. Other logic for using the app variable, the FastAPI instance, is the endpoint itself. So this is an endpoint, all of these functional endpoints. So an endpoint basically saying app dot, because we want to assign this endpoint, register it with this app specifically. Okay, this app instance. So if you control click here, it will return us back to this part. Okay. Now, where do we actually run this? Like, where do we run this app? If you control F and see the substring of it, you will see it run here. What is this? The main condition. Let me explain it. Okay, so basically we're saying that literally I just wrote it in the comments. Programmatically start a UFI current server while debugging for easier control accessibility. So if we're running the code locally, in other words, like debugging and developing, then we can simply write Python main.py here, main API.py to run it, and running it this way will make us be able to run this condition, because this will make the name equal main, and so we'll be able to run this block. Actually, I shouldn't have wrote this. I should have wrote it because the current work directory is here. So I have to navigate to source and then Ansari first. So I have to write source. And there's a cool tip for you. If you're using PowerShell, you can type SR and then tab to autocomplete, and then tab, pressing tab again will autocomplete with the folder that you want. So we have here Ansari Backend, whatever. That's useless folder. We continue to Ansari, and then if you come back here and tab, we get a list of files. So that's pretty helpful. So if I write AP and it continues, and then if I write main, it continues with the options, and then I run this file. So that's a very cool, neat trick. Anyways, yeah. So basically, this is one way to run it. This will run this, which will run this script uv-run. The file name without extension, which is main API.py. This is the file that we're currently in. Okay, so it will get just this part and the :app. :app means what's the name of the instance that you're doing, and we named it app above. So it's app, and the info that you want to run in, and that's it. That's it. It will just run it here in the server. That's one way to do it. Another way to do it is just to use that command directly. Okay, in here in the terminal. Okay, that's another way to do that. But I don't know. I just prefer the Python method, so I just wrote that if name equal main part. Okay, this is regarding this logic. Here, these notes are regarding the WhatsApp logic. I will come to that later. Come back to this part later. And I think this is the main points. The custom exception handler, I explained that. Database connection, yeah, this is quite clear. We just have the database instance and Ansari instance, which is the model, the agent, and the database connection to PostgreSQL database. And then we use that across the file. If you see here, we use it multiple times to register, to check if account exists, etc. The same thing with the agent. So with the Ansari agent, we use it in multiple parts. Where do we use it? Okay, actually, we don't use it. Yeah, we use it in the API presenter, yeah. Okay, what does the API presenter do? Here, its logic is a little bit different than the other presenters. A presenter's logic is just to interface with the user, as in take input from him and then return back output. But here, presenting actually doesn't do that. Why did we call it presenting then? Just to remain with the convention. But honestly, it should be named that for this specific case. Okay, then what does it do? Literally nothing. If you go to present here, it's nothing. Wait, it doesn't present. Why doesn't it present? Because technically, if you think about it, the endpoints over here are the ones that present. Because basically, these are the things that are the functions which interact with the front-end repo. So when we get a request and it gets through one of these functions, these are the functions which reads this requests, and these are the functions which reply back to the request. So basically, this is the interfacing layer with the user. I mean, in terms of backend, at least. So this is technically, all of this is technically the present is how we are presenting to the user. We're taking the input and presenting. Okay, then what does the presenter do in this case? Weirdly enough, I don't know why that choice was made, but basically it just provides a complete function. And what is a complete? What's the word complete? Imagine you have a chat with Ansari and you say, who are you? And it says, I'm Ansari, etc. And then you have now a history of messages, okay, between you and Ansari. And now this is called the history, list of messages. And now you send a new message and you say, okay, tell me the pillars of Islam, for example. And then you want the agent to complete that chat and answer back. So that's why we called it complete. So what it does is take the messages, and which is actually a dictionary which have two pieces of info, I believe, if I recall correctly, the thread, something related to the thread name itself, and the messages. What does the thread mean? I'll come to that later. But basically, what we care about here is the messages value, which is a list. Okay. So this value here, will be a list. Even if you look at the replace message history, you will see that its typing here is a list of dictionaries. Okay. How is this structured, or how is the user message structured? We'll come to that later. Okay. Yeah. So basically, we take the history, okay, that's currently appearing to the user in the UI, and then we say, okay, I want to stream the response. Okay, why stream it? Because if you remember, we want to return the words chunk by chunk. If you remember the yielding logic, the generator function that we said, even here, if you look at this, you'll see that it returns the generator, if you remember. We want to return that one by one as well. The way to do it in Python, here in the code, is yield. The way to do it through the server, through FastAPI to the front-end repo, is by returning a streaming response object. Streaming response is from the FastAPI library. Okay, this automatically says to FastAPI, okay, wait, I'm going to return a response to the UI, but we're not done yet. I will keep streaming the response until there's nothing else to respond from my part as a backend code. So this is what this part means. And so where do we call this? We call this in the main API, obviously. In a couple of functions here, The main one of them is add message, we call it. And what does add message do? Basically, it runs when you make a post request to this part. So if you see in the Ansari website, you will see, if you open up a chat, you will see the chat and everything. And at the top, you'll see a URL. And at the end of the URL, you see a long hash. That hash is the thread ID. Okay. So basically, when you type a message to Ansari and you press enter, in the front end code, implicitly or behind the scenes, we run code in the front end which calls this endpoint with the thread ID similar to the ID that you see at the top of the URL of Ansari chat. Okay. And so when we call it, we pass to it the details that you see in the UI. So currently in the UI, you have who are you and Ansari replies and whatever. And so all of that, when you press enter to enter a new message, to submit a new message to the backend, what gets sent is not only this message, it's this message. No, it's only this message. Yeah, the previous message in the UI don't get sent again. Only this message gets sent. Okay. And you can see it here in the quest because it's an add message request object. So if you see that object, you'll see that it just have role and content. Role will always be user because the person who sends the request is the user. So it's always called user. Even if you go to the front end code, I think you will see user. Yeah, I think user. Maybe if I put a single string, yeah, here. Okay. Where is it? Return user core types. User role, yeah, user role. So these are possible user roles, and so we sent the user, but I just want to see where is this used. Username, yes, here it is. Here it is, okay? So we create the thing that we're going to send to Ansari, to the backend repo, and then that message we specify. So we specify the role with the user role, which is just a user string as you saw, and the content, which is the message that you just typed in the website and hit enter. That message, okay, that's the content. Okay, so that's what's written here has to be, this has to abide with what's written here. Okay, okay, this is something as well. Now after we get this last message, we internally in the code here, if we read the messages one by one, you will understand what's happening. We get the thread history, i.e. we get the previous messages which appear in your UI. We get it from the database from our side, and so now we have the complete history of messages. Okay. And now we add the last message that you just sent when you press enter. We add that to the thread history, and then we get all of that history and then send it to the complete presenter over here, just for the LLM to complete it and give us the response. And the response, the streaming response, will return it here. That's it. Obviously, this is misleading because technically this really isn't a presenter anymore. It technically presents the completed answer of Ansari back to the UI. Anyways, so this is initially the logic. And for the main endpoints that we have here, for the main ones, for the core functionalities that we have, you will see me adding detailed comments explaining what each part of the code does. So I won't go into details here, to be honest, but hopefully you get just a glance and an overall idea of what's happening here in this file. I think I'm done with it. The tricky note is regarding the word presenting and its different meaning here. I already explained that. Cache, fan out cache, to be honest, I'm not expert in caching, so I'm not gonna explain that because I really don't know it. I don't know how exactly it optimizes our memory usage. Additional routers, yeah, this part is important. Okay, so in summary, we have these endpoints over here, and we have endpoints related to WhatsApp in a file called main WhatsApp. Okay. You will see them here, router.get or whatever. So these are endpoints as well. Okay, but in the server, we always run the script of main API.py. Okay, so now the question becomes, I want to run the endpoints here, and I want to run the endpoints in main WhatsApp.py. How do I do that? Do I run two server instances? That's not really a good option. So what we do instead is in this server that we're running right now, in this app variable that we defined above, here, we want to somehow tie or bind the endpoints of WhatsApp's endpoints. We want to bind that with the endpoints of the instance that we have currently running here. Sorry for my English. So how do we do that? How do we make this binding process? By using include router, include the WhatsApp router. So if we control click here, you will see the router that we defined in main WhatsApp.py. And so this router, which I defined here, whenever I create an endpoint, I now add that endpoint to the router object that I created, which is here. And now I call this, okay, in this file, main WhatsApp, the router object, and now I include it here as well. So where does this appear? It appears here. I import it from another file, from the main WhatsApp file that I just showed you. I import router and name it as WhatsApp router. So That's it. That's the whole thing. And now the API endpoints over there will be visible, will be in that same FastAPI instance that we have running in the live environment. That's why if you want to test WhatsApp, you test it by actually running this script, the main API script, by running Python main API.py. So you run this to test either the main API or the WhatsApp API. Okay. So this is also something for you to understand, and hopefully it's not really hard to grasp. Handle CORS validation. Yeah, okay. I think I might leave that part to another. Yeah, I'll leave that part later. That's the last thing remaining in this file. Defining various API endpoints, I don't think that's really necessary due to the comments that I wrote. So yeah, I will start next time from the CORS validation logic.